Sure, we need Supreme Court reform ASAP. There's a lot that we need to do with this Supreme Court because of how utterly trash they are. Sure, we need Supreme Court reform ASAP. I have a number of bills for that if I could just get, enough Democrats to help me get this done. But we need ethics reform. We need to expand the court. There's a lot that we need to do with this Supreme Court because of how utterly trash they are. So I'll give you a little bit more backstory. So back when the 2021 maps were done, at that time when those maps were drawn, I was in the State House. I, along with Eddie Bernice Johnson, Al Greene, and Sheila Jackson Lee, we entered into litigation and we sued the state of Texas over the current maps that we currently have. Texas has been historically found to be racially discriminatory ever since the Voting Rights Act was passed. Every time. So with that being said, you have the Shelby v. Holder case that came out in 2013. Once that court case came out, we ended up having our first redistricting post Shelby v. Holder, which got rid of Section 5, which required preclearance for those states that have always been racially discriminatory. So you would typically have to go through the Department of Justice. They have to evaluate whether or not you're changing voting laws and how that impacts people of color, as well as something like drawing your lines. Like basically you have Big Brother. They decided, oh no, we ain't got no training wheels, we out in these streets, and so they decided to act a fool. So the maps that we have right now are not good, just to be clear. We went through a trial for 3 weeks. So I got out of session one day, had to fly all the way to El Paso. I testify for hours on the stand in front of this exact panel of judges. And interestingly enough, the state was not very well prepared. I think they probably watched too much Fox News, and they believe that I'm low IQ. It was a very weird situation, to say the least, because there was a point in time in which I was being cross-examined by one of the attorneys for the state, and I said something, and she was like, "That's improper. She can't opine on that because she's not a lawyer." And even the judges looked at her and was like, I was like, actually, ma'am, ma'am. But I was like, girl, you are not ready for prime time. Like, you don't even know who you, anyway. So whole other issue. So we go through the 3-week trial, and it's only within a matter of weeks. So they had not ruled on the legality of these particular maps. So I want y'all to understand. We were suing over the 21 maps. We finally got to a 3-week trial in 25. So this is 4 years later. Do y'all get this? Like, I need y'all to understand these timelines. And this is what Texas does. They play and do what's wrong and hope that nobody will do what this court just did, which gave them a temporary injunction, because they like, we can do wrong, but we will drag it out in court. So ultimately, the court doesn't get to rule on the substance of the case from the 21 maps, because all of a sudden they didn't see the light and now they want to draw new lines, which we have been asking them to do. So then the court is like, well, you got to see if they're going to draw good lines. And we know what they finna do. They not finna draw good lines. So they go, they draw the lines. And so then obviously they're terrible. When we say they are racist, which some people feel, ooh, I don't know about saying, okay, you got to call a thing a thing. So let me explain why it is so that y'all know. Like, so it's not just like, oh, it's racist, right? Like, because people try to act like people just go screaming racism. No, what it is that Texas, the entire state of Texas is 61% people of color. 61% people of color. 39% Anglo. When it came down to these lines, what was going to happen is basically we have a total of 38 House seats in the state of Texas. We are talking about a little bit more than 70% of our seats would be chosen by the 39%. That is what it is. So in order for the 39% to be the ones to choose over 70% of our seats that go to DC, that meant that you had to dilute and reduce the voices of the 61%. The estimates are that African Americans in the state of Texas, even though Texas has more African Americans than any other state, would be reduced to 1/5 the voice of their Anglo-Texan brothers and sisters. When it comes down to our Latino brothers and sisters, their voices would be valued at 1/3 that of their Anglo brothers and sisters in Texas. That is why they're racist. That is why they are racist. So they surgically drew these lines. So when you start to talk about the 18th and the change in the 18th, what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, you know what, it's only going to be so many seats that African Americans can choose in the state of Texas. So they basically decided we get 2 seats in the state that has more African Americans. So I don't know what's going to happen in them other states if we only get 2 seats where African Americans can choose their representation. The thing about this that is very confusing and why this court is so bad, there's a lot of reasons, but when it comes to voter suppression, one of the tactics is to have people confused. Confusion is voter suppression. And so right now you have this special election that's taking place, but we also are in filing for our next elections. Most people have not filed on the congressional level because nobody knows where they're supposed to run. You don't know what the lines are. Just earlier this week, they said you run on the 21 lines. Then last night, you got Alito saying, no, you're going to run on these new lines. And then they may come down and say, yes, well, you run on the old lines, but we have to file by December 8th. That's coming up. So, like, there's questions about whether or not they will delay our primary and move our primary. Currently, we are the first Tuesday in March. That is for 26, not for right now. His election is January 31st. The bad part about what's happening in the 18th, there's a lot of bad things about what's happening in the 18th. I want y'all to understand that there were 3 Democratic members that died in Congress since Trump swore in, okay? We had 3. The very first one to pass away was Sylvester. The very last seat that is going to be filled is Sylvester's because of our state. We have special elections that have taken place everywhere else in the country so much faster. And so they are trying to confuse people because people won't know what district they're supposed to be in. It is very bad. But what I want you to understand is that I do think that this court is going to be very political on this because this was a temporary order. It wasn't an order on the merits. And the reason I told you to remember that we just got to court on the original 21 case 4 years later is because technically if the court does not stop them right now, it may be 4 years before we go to court on the daggone case again. Well, guess what? We back to redistricting. We going through census again. And that's all they want. They don't care if they're doing what's right. All they care is that they can get what they want in the moment, and that's why this opinion was so significant. This 3-judge panel was 2 Republicans and 1 Democrat. The Trump Republican was the good one. The Reagan one was the problem. But at the end of the day, he wrote a 160-page opinion about why there would be irreparable harm if you allow this map to go into place right now. It would violate, we made constitutional arguments because they literally have decided that they wanted to decimate the Voting Rights Act anyway. We were arguing the Constitution, the strongest thing that we have in this land, allegedly. And they are now challenging that with a Trump judge writing the opinion. That's how bad this was. When you got a Trump judge calling you racist, you know it's bad.